Awareness by Anthony DeMello. Finding yourself. The great masters tell us that the most important question in the world is, who am I? Or rather, what is I? What is the thing I call I? What is the thing I call self? You mean you understand everything else in the world and you didn't understand this? You mean you understood astronomy and black holes and quasars and you picked up computer science and you don't know who you are? My, you are still asleep. You are a sleeping scientist. You mean you understood what Jesus Christ is and you don't know who you are? How do you know that you have understood Jesus Christ? Who is the person doing the understanding? Find that out first. That's the foundation of everything, isn't it? It's because we haven't understood this that we've got all these stupid religious people involved in all these stupid religious wars. Muslims fighting Jews, Protestants fighting Catholics, and all the rest of that rubbish. They don't know who they are, because if they did, there wouldn't be wars. Like the little girl who says to the little boy, "Are you a Presbyterian?" And he says, "No, we belong to another abomination." But what I'd like to stress right now is self-observation. You are listening to me, but are you picking up any other sounds beside the sound of my voice as you listen to me? Are you aware of your reactions as you listen to me? If you aren't, you're going to be brainwashed, or else you're going to be influenced by forces within you of which you have no awareness at all. And even if you're aware of how you react to me, are you simultaneously aware of where your reaction is coming from? Maybe you are not listening to me at all. Maybe your daddy is listening to me. Do you think that's possible? Of course it is. Again and again in my therapy groups, I come across people who aren't there at all. Their daddy is there, their mommy is there, but they're not there. They never were there. I live now, not I, but my daddy lives in me. Well, that's absolutely, literally true. I could take you apart, piece by piece, and ask, now this sentence, does that come from daddy, mommy, grandma, grandpa? Who? Who's living in you? It's pretty horrifying when you come to know that. You think you are free, but there's probably isn't a gesture, a thought, an emotion, an attitude, a belief in you that isn't coming from someone else. Isn't that horrible? And you don't know it. Talk about a mechanical life that was stamped onto you. You feel pretty strongly about certain things, and you think it is you who are feeling strongly about them. But are you really? It's going to take a lot of awareness for you to understand that perhaps this thing called I is simply a conglomeration of your past experiences, of your conditioning and programming. That's painful. In fact, when you're beginning to awaken, you experience a great deal of pain. It's painful to see your illusions being shattered. Everything that you thought you had built up crumbles, and that's painful. That's what repentance is all about. That's what waking up is all about. So how about taking a minute right where you're sitting now to be aware, even as I talk, of what you're feeling in your body, what's going on in your mind, and what your emotional state is like. How about being aware of the blackboard? If your eyes are open and the color of these walls and the material they're made of, how about being aware of my face and the reaction you have to this face of mine? because you have a reaction whether you're aware of it or not, and it probably isn't your reaction, but one you were conditioned to have. And how about being aware of some of the things I just said? Although that wouldn't be awareness because it's just memory now. Be aware of your presence in this room. Say to yourself, I'm in this room. It's as if you were outside yourself, looking at yourself. Notice a slightly different feeling than if you were looking at things in the room. Later we'll ask, who is this person who is doing the looking? Am I looking at me? What's an I? What's me? For the time being, it's enough that I watch me. But if you find yourself condemning yourself or approving yourself, don't stop the condemnation and don't stop the judgment or approval. Just watch it. I'm condemning myself. I'm disapproving of me. I'm approving of me. Just look at it, period. Don't try to change it. Don't say, oh, we were told not to do this. Just observe what's going on. And I said to you before, self-observation means watching, observing whatever is going on in you and around you as if it were happening to someone else. Well, what's all this about? He talks about finding yourself, and he talks about the idea that your ideas aren't your own, about maybe you're just a conglomeration of all these opinions and ideas and thoughts and feelings that you've gotten from someone else. Maybe your father is talking. Maybe when you were a child, you heard your father say something and you just absorbed that into your thinking. You thought it was right. You were a child. You didn't know any better. You assumed your father was telling you the truth, or your mother, or your grandmother, or your grandfather, or anybody. Things you've heard on TV. Like, where did these things come from? Where did you get these ideas? How do you know they're right? Did you question them? Did you think about them? Or did you just take them because somebody said them? You think you're free, but there probably isn't a gesture, a thought, an emotion, an attitude, a belief in you that isn't coming from someone else. It's like that scene in the book 1984, where they have I believe it's 3 minutes of anger or something, where they show a film and everybody starts screaming and screaming. You know, if you entered that room and you saw all these people looking at the board, shouting and screaming at the scenes on the screen, if you haven't read the book or if you haven't seen the movie, you probably don't know what I'm talking about, but there's an audience there sitting at a screen and they're showing images of war or whatever and their enemies, and everybody's just screaming and screaming, and the guards are watching them to make sure that they're participating. Well, if you just came from the present and walked into that room, you'd say, these people are brainwashed. This is crazy. And maybe they're brainwashed and maybe they're not. Maybe a lot of the people sitting in the audience are just faking it because they know if they don't say what they're expected to say, these guards might take them out and beat them or kill them or throw them in prison or who knows. So they have to pretend. And our society is getting more and more like this now. It's getting harder and harder to tell the truth and to tell how you truly feel about things. And you have to be very careful about what you say because you might offend somebody. You might hurt somebody's feelings. There's all this talk about diversity and inclusion and equity and all this stuff. But they don't really want diversity in the sense of different people discussing different ideas and opinions and accepting these things or debating with people. What they want is a bunch of different people of different races and different genders and different, sexual persuasions or whatever you call it, all espousing the same thing. Everybody's saying the same thing, but they want diversity of colors and races and countries and things like this, and it's absolutely foolishness. You know, we're all a product of our cultures and our families and the times we were born in, the opinions. Us in Canada, we live in a Christian country. Doesn't mean we're all Christians. It means our forefathers were Christians, and the principles that the country was founded upon are Christian ideals. And whether you believe in Christianity or not is irrelevant. And it's hard to understand this. It's like the fish in the fishbowl trying to understand that it's wet. I can understand this very well because as a young man, I left this country and I left this culture and I moved to a totally foreign culture that was not a Christian-based society. I went to South Korea, and the Christianity in South Korea is very strange and very different from the Christianity here because they're not raised in a Christian culture in a Christian country. They're raised in an Eastern philosophy culture. There's Buddhism and other indigenous religions and cultures going on over there that have influenced their being. And when they interpret Christianity, they've been steeped in their religion just as we've been steeped in Christianity. Even if we reject Christianity, we're still fundamentally Christian in our thinking. And if you come from a family that's these days being a conservative or being a liberal is very divisive. You know, if you're a Christian, if you're a conservative, oh, you can't have liberal friends. All your friends have to be liberals, and all the conservatives have to have conservative friends. And it's just arguing. It's not trying to understand, or it's not like, oh, this person has this basket of ideas and beliefs and feelings, and this person has a different one, so they can't connect on any level. Even though 90% of the items in their baskets are exactly the same, there's these big deal breaker ideas. Well, I guess with everybody there's certain things, but it's just ridiculous now how frivolous these things are. I mean, obviously, if you have a bunch of ideas that are almost identical to somebody else, but you're a cannibal and this person isn't a cannibal, well, cannibalism is probably a deal breaker and you don't want anything to do with that person. That's very extreme in an example, but it makes perfect sense. But, you know, if this person, you know, thinks that owning a gun and being able to defend your home and your family is a good thing, and this person is like, no, all guns must be outlawed. Well, they could shake hands and say, well, you know, we agree on everything else. This one item is not a serious deal. No need to break up the friendship or, you know, not have a relationship. But these days, it's like everybody has to say the exact same thing and everybody has to believe the exact same thing, or else you're the worst person in the world. You're one of those you-know-whos. Anyway, something to think about. But we all received our ideas from a variety of sources. Our parents, our culture, our time in history, from the books we read, the people we met, the radio and TV shows we've listened to. But you have to be very careful what's entering your brain. You have to be very careful. You can listen to certain types of music, but you might want to consider what's being said in the music, because if you don't want to go into a trance and just have that sort of enter your brain and accept it as truth without thought. You want to think about the things that you think about. You want to think about the thoughts that you're going to accept and reject. In Candide by Voltaire, the novel, they talk about the walled garden. The walled garden is your skull. The garden is your brain. The wall is your skull. And you have to weed your garden, which means you have to get the bad thoughts out and keep the good thoughts. You have to cultivate. The difference between a garden and just a patch of wild plants and, you know, a patch of wilderness is a garden is planned, it's cultivated, it's weeded, it's taken care of. And yes, the wilderness may be beautiful with all its variety and all that just life there. It's like the joke. A priest comes by and sees the gardener working in his garden. And the priest goes, "Oh, that's a fine garden that the Lord has given you." And the gardener says, "Well, you should have seen it before when it was left to God," meaning it was just a patch of wilderness. It was a totally different thing. He's cultivated, he's weeded it. It was his hard work. Sure, God, you can argue, has provided it for him, but he's the one who cultivated it, just like your brain. You were given this brain. You were given this body. You have to cultivate it. You have to weed it. Your body. I mean, junk food once in a while, fine. But junk food all the time, disaster. Exercising all the time, there's too much of a good thing. Sometimes you have to rest. But you have to work your mind. You have to cultivate your walled garden. You have to keep your body in this world. You have your body, you have your brain and your mind, you have your relationships. Cultivate all that. If you have toxic relationships in your life, sadly, you're going to have to say goodbye to certain people. You're going to have to find the right people you want to surround yourself with. Same with your body, foods. Painful. You have to cut out some foods. You have to add others. Painful. Ideas, thoughts, books. Some of your ideas are not good. Get rid of them. Test them. Everything needs to be tested. Anyway, this video is getting long. Lots to think about there. Remember, who loves you, baby? This guy. Till next time. Love you. Goodbye.